Okay, hello everyone, welcome to today's episode. Okay. In this episode, I would like to speak about different routes of evolving human psychology. The subtitle I will explain further on in the talk. I want to begin by looking at what we call human psychology. And so there's a approach I can say, it's an approach I often take in the analysis of anything, whether it's an object or a subject. I begin wondering about what the object or subject meant in the past, what it means now, and what it's going to mean in the future. So I want to speak about how human psychology was in the past, how I find it's here in the present, and I have considered certain paradigms in the future, certain events that I feel kind of like chapters where, it's like our species hasn't read the chapter yet, but it's in the content list of history. So first, I want to explain human psychology in a very simple way, that an object after a very long time became a subject to itself. And so the only reason we use psychology, the term psychology, is because prior to that there's the physiology. And so the physiology creates an opportunity for the psychology, and what that means is first there was an individual body separate to the world. That means imagine first there was just the world. Then there is a body in the world. Then there is a consciousness and awareness of this body to itself in the world. And the moment we become a subject to ourselves, that's when we first can even notice ourselves as an animal. Okay, so sorry guys, this was mute for a second and I was talking, so I'm just going to recap in case if it wasn't recorded. From an unconscious world, we went to an unconscious self. From an unconscious self, we went to a conscious self. From a conscious self, we're going to go into the conscious world. The conscious world, I predict from a time frame of 3,600 years or 4,600 years from 2021 currently. I'm just that person throwing out a prediction. So what that means is there was a point where there was just the world, then man became an extension from that world, an unconscious extension, and then a conscious endurance, and in some sense a return back into the unconscious. Excuse me guys, this episode may have a bit more pauses than usual. Pretty much we exist on an atomic level. This existence somehow moved to an experiential position. So we have a subjective experience. So our evolutionary human psychology is pretty much a part of the world that has noticed itself. Now I'm wondering about when we go to the future, what's going to happen. And in order to explain this, I got to share some of my own ideologies here, where I feel there's going to be certain revolutions, but not like physical kind of old school historic, French Revolution like thing. Not like that. A revolution in human attention. I would say right now in 2021, from our current moment, right now we're going through a communication renaissance, if you can say. After the communication renaissance, I think this would go for 30 years, and then it's going to become a geometrical renaissance, a global renaissance. Just keep this in mind, just whoever's listening right now, if you just tuned in, just entertain what I'm saying. I'm trying to suggest global shifts in human perception. So we go into a sort of geometrical renaissance. That means certain transformative things in society are going to happen for communication first. Then it's going to happen in our understanding of geometry. After certain unique geometrical events have happened for the collective, then we go into cyberspace. So I would say we are right now 2 chess moves away from cyberspace. One chess move, the species advances its communication. The next chess move would be a collective, again, geometrical advancement. Not just our attention to language, but to geometry. That means when I say there's going to be a geometrical renaissance, there may be people in the future, and you can consider myself as one of them, that there will be people in the future who will begin suggesting that there is a completely geometrical dimension of perception. That means the reason right now I'm saying we're going through a communication renaissance, because our reality is language. Language it's as if the human idea is purely in language. But from the subject being in a sort of character in a story, I feel can move into pure geometry. Once it goes into an identification with pure geometry, that means right now we're a human being in a world, that's the story. Probably in the future we're just going to be a geometrical event, And after that, we're going to go into cyberspace, where our biological consciousness may act like a god that has forgotten where it is. So, see these as paradigms, even though I'm saying renaissance, even though I'm saying revolution. These are just events I see. If I was to kind of fast forward my mind to right now, the world I see, to the future, and of course keep in mind I'm just one person. But so here, think of it this way: a global communication reform, a global geometry reform, and then when cyberspace comes, that's going to be a very different paradigm. I don't know if I'm going to be alive for that. Right now, we do have a relationship with cyberspace, and we are in the pioneering phase. Anyone alive in 2021, this is why everybody's being encouraged to learn code. Or how to code, at least. When we go to cyberspace, if we are conscious that the user of technology is natural and that's what we want, we stay human. If the cyberspace era comes and we don't care for nature, that means, let's say you're a human being and you're just like, you don't care about the uniqueness of the graceful passage of, let's say, the ego through a biological body. That means someone could be like, yo, I'm made of carbon atoms as an organism, and so a computer is made from silicon, you know? And so imagine, in some sense, instead of carbon being the element of unknown intelligent expressionism, it can become, for example, silicon in the future. That means, imagine an android and a human philosopher get into an argument in the future. The android says, we look at the android, and the philosopher, let's say, looks at the android and says, it's like, hey man, you're a machine, you're not human. You know, you'll never know what human consciousness is like. And imagine this is very far in the future, and the android gets offended. The android's like, excuse me man, it's like the only difference between me is I'm made of silicon, you're made of carbon, but the consciousness is the same. So if an android begins challenging the human being on what is conscious, a common denominator beyond the elemental when it comes to intelligent movement. What I mean by this is that pretty much, let's say an AI in the future, which is going to be the android psychology, is programmed. And so this android would look at the human being and see we are programmed, but we're programmed by the ecosystem. You know, that means we programmed the machines and nature programmed the humans in some sense. Or human behavior. You know what it is? It's kind of like an unknown force sculpted by the DNA, or I don't know how to say it. It seems too specific to me. You know, when I look at, for example, the human organism, and I look at all organisms, like for me, one of the biggest things that fascinates me is creaturehood. It blows my mind. It just, you don't know in what level it fascinates me. Let me tell you why. Because it's understandable, the world, the concept of a world is understandable. Something has to be here. But why this something looks the way it does is the, I would say, is the bizarre part. That means in a existence where on a rock in the middle of nowhere, right, where only light beams are hitting it, in some sense, just think about it. just think about it. It's like creaturehood has emerged. As a unique genetical design has occurred. It's too sculpted for to be accidental, you know. What I mean by that is like, not that a story is the owner of man, like a theological story or something, but just that it's understandable, just the concept of matter, but matter looking a certain way again. I mean, even through the scientific lens, I would say we would look at the universe and we would say there's a concept called cosmic inflation that at the beginning of the universe, in accordance to the Big Bang Theory, it was like a pool of energy, a pool of potential energy. And so this potential energy in less than a second expanded the size of like galaxies. It's called cosmic inflation. What I mean by that is like out of nowhere, like a magic show, a ridiculous amount of phenomenology arose because from a non-physical, you can say energetic state, the universe cooled down. Do you know what it is? It's as if like, you know how somebody makes, let's say let's say a blacksmith makes a sword, or that sword, as it cools down, it becomes less malleable. It's as if the universe started from infinity and it cooled down to be finite. That means it could be the fact that, I shouldn't say fact, but it could be theoretically hypothesized that the universe was in some sense not born infinity cooled, you know. Pretty much we use the cause and effect idea and we wonder about the cause and effect. Now, if we choose to see the Big Bang as an effect, the cause becomes a mystery. If we say the film of existence started from there, then everything else becomes the effect of a singular moment. And to hypothesize, to be honest, the origin of the universe, like right now we don't have even nanotechnology to create food out of it nowhere, you know, but I don't know how to say it, but everything that we are calling knowledge is abstraction that is synchronized to the outer realms. It's inner realm considerations that match the outer realm. So, right now, let's say we are in the era of advanced communication. Then we go to the era of advanced geometry. Then we go to the era excuse me. Then we go to the era of advanced cyberspace. Then we go to an era where I have fathomed way in the future after cyberspace becomes first nature to human beings. You know, becomes like second nature, let's say. Because the concept of first nature, second nature, the first nature has a theological significance. That means man's divine nature. But let's say the era of advanced communication, the era of advanced geometry, the era of advanced cyberspace. Then we step out of cyberspace and we have an external relationship with technology. I would say this is the mecha era. I've talked about this in other talks. This is the era where actually giant robots will become like man's best friend psychologically. That means, imagine you're a person who has understood language. You've experienced the linguistic simulation. You've understood let's say the species went through a geometrical renaissance. You've understood the geometrical dimension. That means you have no fear of geometry. And everything in existence is shape, guys. Keep that in mind. Anything that we can talk about or communicate, it's either it has to do with a shape, either it's like the shape or it's the absence of shape. So after one has understood a sort of global, let's say geometrical comprehension of reality, then we would have the psychology to enter cyberspace. So to be honest, no human will enter cyberspace, but geometrical beings will enter cyberspace. This is kind of what I'm saying. Now, after we get out of cyberspace, we go to the, as I was saying, the mecha era. This is where man and machine literally, technology becomes equivalent to nature for us. And this is a bizarre concept, and probably many people will disagree, but I feel it may. This is a probability. And this may even be something stranger, because this is my own podcast, I can say it. I feel I should have been, personally as a being, I feel I should have been born in the era of advanced mechanisms, the mecha era. That means a part of me feels I feel I might have entered existence's room a bit early as a conscious being. But anyways. So beyond the mecha era, probably there will be a choice to endlessly explore cyberspace or the interstellar. So it would be a return. So pretty much, guys, you know what it is? Rather than people thinking we're inside a simulation, or the world is a simulation, I would say these are kind of like the phases of reality, where a collective being separates into individual doers, senses of doing, and then in some sense it collectivizes. So pretty much it's a sine wave. It's an up and down of individual consciousness, collective being, individual consciousness, collective being, individual consciousness, collective being. If we don't understand the collective being, you think you're in samsara, endlessly reincarnating. If you understand that collectivity means no longer individual time, that means when I say this era of cyberspace, that's the era of collective mindhood, guys. That means by that time in the future, just like how right now I'm a conscious attention inside my own biological body giving this talk, in the future, if I was alive in the cyberspace era, the mecha era is, we've kind of stepped out of cyberspace, but if I was in the cyberspace era, in some sense I would be able to, let's say 9 billion people in the future connect to a cyberspace server. Right, so that means 9 billion consciousness has become an ocean, but the experience of the body is like a drop. So what that means is, right now I'm experiencing one biological body and one unknown mind space where this body is in. In the future, the mind's going to become a field. It means an example would be as if I was giving a podcast in the future. Pretty much what I'm trying to say is that we can literally enter and exit each other's bodies at will. So technically, we access a mind that is inside all the individual biological embodiments. this would be an example of the cyberspace era. What I mean by that, it's the death of the personality. That means it's meta-personality. Meta-personality would be pretty much the language we would use in explaining how human beings in psychology and cyberspace not only oscillates from the creation archetype to the creator archetype, but pretty much the cyberspace era is a suggestion that we will enter our imaginations. Right now, our imagination is inside us, inside the brain we're fathoming. In the future, we're going to be pretty much inside our imagination. An example in previous talks I gave is, imagine a person coming home from work and they're just exhausted. They come home, they put on this like unique headset, virtual reality, cyberspace technology. And so the person suddenly, after coming home from work, takes off their coat, puts their briefcase aside, or their hovering briefcase just lands somewhere. And the person would go enter a cyberspace reality where they are God. When I say they are God, that means they're the creator of the server. That means the same freedom we experience right now in our imagination, like in my imagination. What was that anime show called, like Naruto or whatever? Like I can visualize various copies of myself. I can literally visualize like an army of myself in my inner realms. But that army of myself is not experiential. That means I can see it. I can't have a sensory relationship with it. Cyberspace is going to be pretty much it's going to allow us to touch our imagination. So, where was I going with this? Yeah. And remember, I told you, I gave a prediction earlier that in 4,600 years or 3,600 years, we're going to have a choice to go beyond the language threshold. Aziz in the chat section says you are the creature of a server. What I mean by that is that right now we're all in, like, let's say an elemental server. A server that is made from the periodic table. Pretty much a Buddhist can look at like the planet and be like, yo, is a species, is the periodic table reincarnating as people, as creatures? So the server for the biological entity was the environment. Now the more excuse me. So the more we evolved, the server became more in our domain. That means when you look at our early ancestors, they didn't even have names. They were just creatures in the forest, They probably bit each other and threw mud at each other and all that shit. So there was a primitive level of creaturehood. No name, nothing, and the server was the ecosystem. I'll tell you this how I'm saying this so easily, guys. Look at any animal. Like, I've given a lot of talks outside, and I can't tell you how much I've observed bird and squirrel psychology. Sometimes even cat psychology. And so the creature is its environment, is its imagination. So animals, because they're not like the human being, they don't have an additional dimension of conscious noticing of themselves, animals have to move in the environment to expand their imagination. So that means our ancestors had nothing. Their purpose wasn't to talk to one another. Their purpose was to, as a creature, explore the space, right? So when your imagination is your ecosystem, when you want a new idea, you just move to a new location. But when we became conscious and pretty much we stood on two legs and we named ourselves and we put on clothing and we built, giant metal capsules that transport us to work, right? This is a suggestion that we. This is a suggestion that what was nature's server? Nature was the administrator to the server that was the context of the creature. When we became conscious, with the free will coming into history, and the free will is actually the creator of history. But I will tell you, with the free will coming into play, we became a moderator of a server where nature is the administrator. And if you are a being that has imagination, this is a suggestion that you have before, technically from a Buddhic Vedic standpoint, you have spoken to the administrator before this life if you have an imagination. Any human being that has an imagination right now, I don't care if you think you're smart or stupid, that's all clothing for the mind, I would say when it comes to administration, nature's laws are in the outer realms first, so in whatever psychology we have, we can't ignore how the world is listening to nature's laws. But we are that part of nature that can control its own laws, that can set its own laws, that can change its mindset, change its attitude. That means while we're in a nature's server, where nature is the administrator, we have either started our own server or we are a moderator, which means we are like an admin in our own permitted space, right? Like right now, I would say me giving these talks, I have through my intuition found the space of my karmic authorization. So think of it this way, that everybody is actually going through karma, but it's how you use your karma. And because you have a different karma, like let's say, I personally don't entertain the idea of past lives. I entertain the idea of future lives. But the future life, it doesn't have a shape for me. So in some sense, I'm talking about past lives right now, but I personally don't identify with past lives, because it's like the tip of an iceberg can have any past life. The whole iceberg is the actual reality, So if nature is a collective truth, we are everybody's past life and future life. Everybody is each other's past life and future life, That means energy doesn't care about human psychology, but human psychology cares about how energy is interpreted by human psychology. So, I would say that any idea of self, that means, you know what it is? Pretty much the world is a cake. Imagine like a birthday cake. And this cake is cut into pieces, and now human consciousness, any human being listening, you're like one of these pieces of this cake. Now you have the option in trying to live a life where you are the whole cake, even though the cake is cut, but the pieces are it still appears as one cake, I feel based on every person's ego, pretty much the algorithm. What am I saying? The algorithm is either from individual to collective or collective to individual. That means I could literally classify all human beings on the planet just by this method. Who is being individual first and who's being collective. Do you know why? Because if you're a collective being right now listening to me, individualism is your fascination. If you're an individual listening to me, collectivism is your fascination. And the future is collective. The future is not for an individual being. That means any being who is individual, technically, what other option does a candle have, right? You know what it is? It's like the human psyche. I refer to like our consciousness. That means right now, my body is found in the space of my mind. So my mind is like a candle glow, and the brain is like the wick of the candle. The wax is the biological body, and that which has kindled that which has kindled or rekindled the flame of the candle is not from the candle. Do you know? That means if a candle, imagine you turn on a candle with a lighter, the candle is on, and imagine the candle became conscious, and the candle was like, who lit me? Did I create myself, or did something else create me? You know, did I illuminate, did I bring my consciousness here, or did something else bring my consciousness? So think of the future as an ocean, think of our past as a drop, and think of as we go towards the future, the drop is going to become a river, more collective until the cyberspace era. I think during the cyberspace era of advanced cyberspace, I personally feel an event is going to happen inside cyberspace that is going to cause a lot of human beings to step out of it. Right now, we're outside of cyberspace. I'm giving this talk here. So this means different dimensions are having a relationship. Right now, if I was very simply to classify intelligence on this planet, I would say it pretty much comes down to natural intelligence, unnatural intelligence, then natural intelligence we can control, and natural intelligence we can't control, unnatural intelligence we can control, and unnatural intelligence we can't control. Right, so in the year 2050, Ray Kurzweil suggests that technology is going to reach a point where it's going to update so much faster than human beings can control it. So that's a suggestion of technology becoming uncontrollable, and unnatural intelligence having an active role in the outer realms. And if anybody has a question, you can just write in context to, and then write the topics before writing the question, so I know what the questions are about. So we start with the domains of control. That means human psychology. The whole point of even someone talking about it, if it wasn't in our control, there would be no reason for me to talk about it. You know, it's like right now I can't give a talk on like how to tell the cells in your body where to go. Though that's an involuntary automated process for the organism, right? But I can tell, for example, what a person can look at where there is a control of the free will. So I would say we have mathematics. Mathematics is let me see where it would come in the spectrum. So let's say we create a spectrum. We say natural technologies and unnatural technologies. Excuse me. So in this spectrum, for example, a tree is a natural technology. So a tree would come at the left of the spectrum. On the right of the spectrum would be, for example, a tree inside cyberspace, a purely unnatural technology. And I would say mathematics and numbers, they come in the middle. So mathematics it kind of represents nature, but at the same time is an unnatural, arbitrary system overlaid upon nature. Now, I think pretty much I've gone through all the routes. I see an inner realm. I mean, by now everybody who's listened to these talks so far knows, like, I perceive an inner realm, an outer realm to anything. That means anybody tells me a subject, any topic, I instantly wonder about how much of that topic is in some sense animated in the inner realms, kept alive in conception only, and how much of it is an actual experiential thing, as if like when I think about human psychology, on one level it's human psychology is going where the biological body is going. On another level, the biological body is surviving just so that in the inner realms we can go somewhere. It's as if like so guys, an interesting question has arose in the chat section. And I encourage, by the way, the listeners to use the live stream. I mean, if people don't use the live stream, like the comment section, it's equivalent to me like recording this talk, like pre-recorded. So Aziz says, Mr. Within, do you think the ego is the best concept to evolve human psychology? Not at all. The ego is the current technology that we use, and the ego, the best way to see it is an Iron Man suit, because the ego has geometry even though it's a character in a story. So the ego is just a vehicle. So imagine like you want to find a vehicle to get to your workspace. Okay, it's as if is the ego important, or is the work you're gonna do important? It's pretty much is the Iron Man suit important, or how we use the Iron Man suit to build an advanced civilization. I would say pretty much think of it this way. Imagine being conscious of your inner realms is equivalent to 8 billion human beings realizing the idea they have of themselves is an idea suit. It's not a suit made of iron, it's a suit made of idea. It's an idea suit. So literally it's an idea man, You know, I think hipsters would agree too, you know. So what I'm talking about is that just like how we say, all right, there's something supreme, something more intelligent than the body, inside the body, moving the body. Most people say they have a body, if you notice. They say my body, my hand, my leg. They don't say I am the body. They don't say I am my hand. They don't say I am my... Do you know what I mean? So we naturally in our language, or at least in the English language, in all languages pretty much, we own the idea, but the owner can't be the idea if it's owning the idea. It's equivalent to someone saying my birthday. It's like, wait a minute, whose birthday? My birthday, but who is that my? You know? So the ego is an important idea because it is a vehicle. It's like, you know, Aziz, it's a good question you're asking, but you're asking me, hey, is the car that our mind is driving important? It's like, yeah, when your mind's in the highway inside a car moving, the idea of yourself is very important, but it's not the most important idea. The most important idea, I would say, the most important, the best concept to evolve human psychology is just this: advanced civilization in the outer realms, advanced communication in the inner realms. I have narrowed it to that. There is nothing greater we can do in the outer realms. Because the advanced civilization is literally a human being being like, yo, before I exit this world, this temporary world, what is the greatest effort of the human mind? What is it? Like, to me, you don't understand, guys, the reason I talk about an advanced civilization is because I want to see one. Do you know, you don't understand the fascination I have for it. In my inner realms, I've seen it, but in the outer realms, it's as if, how are the actors in the script being written by themselves going to play out? You know? That means pretty much an actor improvising is literally the actor being the director of the moment, you know? As if the film director's like, yo, this actor's going off the script lines, but I like how it's going, you know, keep going, you know? As if the gods looked at the human beings trying to build an advanced civilization and they're like, all right, it's not that much of a religious idea, but because it's considering the best of all possibilities, you know, it's like, let's see what happens. That means human beings can do something on Earth that we actually get, you know how like somebody makes a nice Facebook post and a bunch of people like it? You know, let's say it's a hot day and somebody puts a post of like a cold beverage. Everybody's gonna like that cold beverage, you know. You know, so it's kind of like humanity does something that the universe becomes an ally of. And when I give these talks, guys, I mean, people should consider that I'm a person constantly saying multidimensional perception. You know, that's the future's freedom, you know. But that means technically, as I'm giving this talk, I am not giving this talk only to a human audience. I am giving this talk also to the collective unconscious, you know. Because it's intent. I mean, you can think of the movie Matrix, okay? You can think of that moment where Neo in the Matrix realized he's the one. The code on the screen became weird, right? So that means it's if we say the code, just like the Matrix screen, the code for human being is the idea, the story, the language that moves in their mind, right? So if language begins moving different in your mind, it's like the code in the Matrix screen being different. Anytime there is a novel dimension added, do you know, the energy of the whole system changes. It's kind of like a new employee entering the workspace. That new employee's energy, presence, how they express themselves is going to have an effect on the psychology of others in the workspace, right? And life is not about trying to stay true to one idea that never changes, but rather to understand that truth is change. Change is the only idea that never changes, you know. So we got to be realistic in the sense of being like, okay, in 2021, biological body, simultaneously subjective body, the ego. So right now we are pretty much egos in biology, or biological egos. That means the individualism of our body makes us consider ourselves as an individual. Most likely where this can go is that, what are the options? Either nothing, either unity, a singularity, or infinity. That's the only way. That means the future, either we're gonna attempt immortality, that means till the end of time we're just gonna be, human beings that have a good time, reproduce. Or we transition the mind. That means, think of it this way, that the more we understood about the brain, the more we understood about our experience, Like, I can't tell people how powerful imagination is. Imagination is Photoshop freedom. Photoshop level of freedom with any idea. That means I can see any shape and close my eyes, and in my inner realm stem out a universe out of that geometry. In the future, we're going to realize probably what's going to happen. Like, for example, right now I'm a smoker, okay? I'm a person who's smoking. When we look at civilization on a whole, it's not like there's honor in the civilization. It's not like in the economical sector, businessmen are going, we're going to create the greatest products, the greatest services to advance humanity. Rather, they're like, okay, what's the best margins, As if what that means is it's as if right now we are living in an artificial world, because we, in the outer realms, we're temporary. That means anytime a person goes to a restaurant, for example, right, they don't clean the table like how the waitress cleans the table, right? Nobody goes to the restaurant and asks for, like, what do you call it, like a table towel and a spray, and starts cleaning the table after they've eaten food, right? After they've eaten the food in the restaurant, they leave. Why? Because they don't have to be in that space. Now, 8 billion human beings are convinced that they're just temporary material objects, so we're treating the earth like a restaurant. We don't have to clean the table after, And this is very complex. We all are, right? Now think of it this way. In the future, for example, by all biological mishaps are going to pretty much be taken care of by technology. Literally, there's this website called ArtStation. I'm trying to increase, trying to lead more people towards this website. In this website, ArtStation, a lot of illustrators draw science fiction work. And I remember I don't remember the person's name, but I was looking through this art gallery on this website. Some next level illustrator had drawn some science fiction paintings, and he had drawn this picture of these 3 beautiful girls. But these 3 beautiful girls, for example, the girl's neck was robotic. Her joints were robotic, but she looked like a very beautiful, like, young girl, So so what I'm saying is that in the it's an infusion of the biological existence with what man invents. So our creation is integrating with us because it has no choice. It's as if we create AI. AI is going to have a relationship with human beings because we have brought it into the same server. So that means that in the future, can you imagine being a parent, and so you see it in some movies, like the family sitting at the dinner table, like the daughter comes and says, "Dad, I want to get a tattoo." Everybody has a tattoo, and the father's like, "No daughter of mine's going to get a tattoo." In the future, imagine the daughter's going to come and say, "Hey Dad, the cool kids in class all became robots. They changed their body parts into robotic body parts, and now they're the coolest people in class. Can I become a robot too?" And the father's like, "No daughter of mine's going to be a robot." And imagine one day the father comes home and there's like android version of the girl, like standing at the door. And the father's horrified. My daughter became a robot, my biological daughter. And imagine then the mother and the biological daughter come back and it was a prank or something, 100% if androids become indistinguishable from humans, if there's going to be so many pranks, like the grandchildren of all those YouTubers who are doing pranks now are probably going to be doing pranks on androids or whatever, or with androids. The geometrical dimension is something that I have felt, if destiny was like an arrow an archer had thrown before birth at the end of time, that means imagine a multidimensional archer released the bow and the arrow went through, and the arrow was just consciousness projected in time, You see, dear listeners, it's about preference, ultimately. Preference means the human being at some point in their life realizes that their eyes are starting alone in the universe. That means it's as if we start off as a candle in the dark cosmos. Then, in the space of the consciousness of this candle, there comes relationship with phenomena. And when it comes to the inner realm, for the longest time, I thought about why is it that we can't explain the metaphysical, And you know what it was? I think there was something that I was blessed with, that in my inner realms, my imagination moved geometrically. That means, so you can hear some people say like, hey man, the other day an angel talked to me. Imagine someone in the New Age community. If I was to say something similar to that, I would say, hey man, the other day I saw a geometrical shape autonomously be alive without any personality in my inner realms. That means for me, I'm not copy pasting human psychology in the inner realms to find the mishap of, or the shortcoming of deception, right? Because the moment the person gives a personality to their imagination, you can literally choose any myth, any subject can become the context of your moment. So in the inner realms, every person, you know what it is? It's as if the inner realms are like an ocean, okay, like an unknown ocean, and any person who closes their eyes and authentically, sincerely wonders about, okay, I'm in this life once, what am I? What is this intelligence? What is my mind? What is this thing I'm calling imagination? And why is it not the same as physical reality, but why do I have access to it, right? So when the human being wonders about the edges of their perception, and you dare to go beyond the edge of your perception, like how Frodo went beyond the Shire, similarly, that is when I would tell you officially become a mystic. That means the idea is not that you never have a fear of the unknown. The idea is that whenever the unknown arises, unknown variables animate intelligently in the moment, the person notices them. Imagine like you're a friend you haven't seen for years, in some sense, let's say you see that friend and it's as if you won't ignore them in the room. Similarly, imagine you suddenly remember a way of existing in nature, or a way of having experience existing in nature that has nothing to do with time, which has nothing to do with character customization through a sentence structure. So you see, it's like the mind is timeless. The mind is already in the future. That's why imagination can be so vivid. The mind is timeless. The body is in time, simply because the mind creates the concept of time for the body. That means, how can the mind that created the concept of time be inside time? This is why we are not ideas. So when we realize we're more than ideas, that would be the completion of the era of advanced communication, when we realize we're more than geometrical shapes, that will be the completion of the era of advanced geometry. When we realize we're more than cyberspace, I want to say phenomenology, but I would call it cyberspace worldhood. When anytime we realize we're more than it's like the end of the era of advanced, what do you call it, advanced cyberspace. It's like when we realize we're not a cyberspace entity. I kind of shook the geometry of what I was saying, but pretty much I'm saying, like, when we're no longer a creature in language, we evolve beyond the linguistic simulation. When we realize we're beyond geometry, we evolve beyond the geometrical simulation. When we realize we're beyond cyberspace, we evolve beyond the cyberspace simulation. Then, in the Mecha era, and the Mecha era, it's as if, how would I say it? The Mecha era would be the era where we have realized an independence of mind that can move anywhere. Right now, our mind can move only in the biological body, physical biological body, as the physical biological body, okay, in the outer realms. Imagine in the future, not only there would be no such thing as shape-shifting, there would be pretty much one collective server where attention can log into any biological body. So when we have mastered the outer realms and inner realms during the Mecha era, it will be the era where machine and man will create their greatest artwork, and that will push us into the interstellar era. You know, the interstellar era means I gotta talk about Civilization 2.0, but I'm gonna keep this for another episode, okay? But pretty much I'll take it towards, so far, let me give it a number. So interstellar era, 3,600 years. The Mecha era, the era of advanced communication is in the next 30 years. The era of advanced geometry, I know that cyberspace is going to be in 120 years. These are just numbers, guys. From my inner realms, I'm putting out there. So the era of advanced geometry is going to be somewhere between 30 years to 90 years from now. 30 to 90 years from now, there's going to happen some massive global geometrical revolution, renaissance, right? In the next 30 years, there's going to happen a linguistic renaissance, you know. Hopefully these Mr.Within talks of mine contribute to that. And then, in cyberspace, we're in 120 years, the era of advanced cyberspace. In 120 years, there may be the first child born in cyberspace, a child born where its biology is inside, like, some, let's say, fluid pod. That means the child, imagine in 10 years of life, somehow through the intervention of cyberspace with the brain of that child, lives like 100 years. So imagine you live 100 years of life and in cyberspace, and you, for example, die in that cyberspace simulation. You wake up as a 10-year-old in your biological body. Do you know what I mean? So that could be an example of in some sense, in 120 years, the first child might be born in cyberspace, you know. I would say the Mecha era would be way longer. So 120 to 3,600 years from now, and probably the Mecha era is going to happen 1,120 years. I'll give it. I get a feeling that's going to be when it's going to happen, you know. So you see, guys, these are just probabilities. I'm a human being. I'm looking at 2021. I'm observing the systems that are moving. Like pretty much I'm looking at a giant universal empty space. There's a rock. On the surface of the rock, there's behaviorology of animals, and there's behaviorology of a specific animal that has created something that no other animal has created. So the vastness of society, in some sense, is an incredible sub-server. That means we've created a server over nature's server, but this server is inside that server. So all the truths of man return to the truths of nature until man forgets nature. Okay, and when we forget nature, that's going to be a very weird time. That would be a very weird time where I would say, if we choose to become immortal robots, like transfer consciousness into that, we would probably, as consciousness, live maybe, let's say, 100,000 years, and then want to get bored of just our consciousness being limited to a robotic body and just become a field of intelligence at that point. As Esmeralda in the chat section says, so does that mean you're living in others' thoughts if you're born in cyberspace? For that child who's the first child born in cyberspace, it's living inside the simulation that was programmed before it was born. That means right now some people treat Earth as a simulation, and so we were born inside the simulation of nature. The ancient yogis perceived it that way, right? But that child who's going to be born in cyberspace, imagine that first child born in cyberspace. In the history books, it becomes like, imagine, this is a very sci-fi context, but imagine that child, 50 years of life in cyberspace, like it being like, imagine the child is 10 years old. Okay. Imagine the child is 5 years old, and it's been living 50. It's been in its brain has been experiencing 50 years. I would say 50 years of psychological human life in 5 years of biological life in cyberspace. So pretty much it's a 5-year-old body with the psychology of a 50-year-old man, and the child hasn't even seen the outer realms yet, Now, imagine that 50-year-old person in cyberspace suddenly asks itself, where am I? Is this the end of the world? And midway in that cyberspace realizes it's a 5-year-old in another dimension. So that would be enlightenment in the simulation, but eventually the simulation has to finish, and that child at the age of 10 wakes up from cyberspace and realizing it like, even though the mind experienced a lifetime, that would literally be the second lifetime for that child. So it would be another way where human beings can live 100 years in 10 years, and then we will have 10-year-olds with, like, a lifetime of psychology and wisdom, And guys, this is just fiction. So let me tell you how at least my method is. For me, I noticed that because we have emotions, when it comes to thinking, we can't really think that deeply, because at some point we become emotional and we change our attention. So to truly be able to think, one has to think about things geometrically. That means devoid of emotion, devoid of in some sense, cultural or past preference and all of that. Do you know? Now, this is considering there is only one reality. If right now there is, let's say, right now imagine I'm giving this talk and there is 6 other, excuse me, imagine aside from this, imagine this was my soul was a cube. Imagine my soul was cubic, so there would be like 6 parallel lives being lived, imagine. And of course, guys, I feel every human being should think about the future. You know, for me, when I see the New Age community, I see incredible minds that have been, in some sense, you know what it is? It's as if I'm that person going to the New Age community and being like, hey, want to build an advanced civilization, you know, and also get enlightened, you know, at the same time. All right. So guys, I recently realized in the chat section I can create a poll. So I'm going to create a poll, and people can choose in the chat section which one they want. So treat this talk of mine as if I'm piloting your attention, as if you're in the airplane of my vocal universe. And so what that means is I'm in some sense giving right now. Okay, let me finish writing this. Story tunnel, quote tunnel, and yeah, there we go. So guys, I've put a poll. Why is the poll messed up? So there's a poetry tunnel, quote tunnel, and a story tunnel. There's 8 people listening now. There may be some people on trains even listening right now. So people can choose if they want a poetry, if I take the direction of the talk towards poetry or towards quotes, which means history, or stories, which means a moral of wisdom. Nice. So the votes are coming in. For now, poetry tunnel is 50%, the other 225. So guys, I'm going to have a minute of a breather until people cast in their votes. Okay, so anybody who's listening to this, just go to the chat section and just choose one of the options. Okay, so I think it's looking like poetry, guys. And of course, when I say poetry, I don't mean, you know, the aesthetics of emotion only. I mean, like, poetry is language moving at a fast speed. The inner realms are faster than the outer realms, and so they see the outer realms in multiple ways, and you can put that in sentence structure. I wrote this poetry book, guys. I think poetry is I'm going to end the poll. And guys, after I read a few poems, I'm going to go back to the talk, of course. Keep that in mind. So there we go. I wrote a poetry book. It's called I Am No Body, but there's a space between the word no and body. All these poems and books will soon they will be accessible on a bookstore, Mr. Within's library soon, guys. So guys, I wrote this in, when did I write this? 2015. So the poetry book is called I Am Nobody, and the first poem is also called I Am Nobody. I'm going to read that. Excuse me. So, sorry guys, have to refuel. Okay. I am nobody. Some people ask too many questions without realizing it is from their temporalness that eternity is found. The love of creation is always a glance for the Creator beyond words. Transcending the ego is the first stepping stone on the path of love's totality. I am not a dervish, but I spin like one with a capital O. The joy of reality is a boundless moment beyond thought, where the past and future cannot be a nuisance. Did you know your real home is not made from bricks, but is the here and now? Many cats have looked in the eyes of Zen masters and seen a reflection beyond any catastrophe. The joy of being is how now, with a capital N, it's written, now we are all seeing. That means the last sentence of the poem, guys, anybody who realizes that everybody is just conscious, a conscious intelligent moment in the space-time continuum, this is the joy of existence. This is what joy has been this whole time. It is presence in a world where movement is authorized. I will read the 7th poem. The 7th poem is titled The Inspiration of Spirit. How has the wind of truth's mistake How has the wind of truth's mistake found heaven to be changing and true? The limitless is found through the gift that is limitation. Do you really think your head has hit the curb? The inspiration of spirit is how you are born and unborn and facelessly pure. Do not forget yourself. You are the whole cosmos. That means, just on a side note, guys, that means I am simultaneously talking to the whole universe as the whole universe, while being a part of the universe, talking to individual parts of the universe. That is the multidimensionality of our realm, and it cannot be ignored any longer. And guys, I don't know why someone is whistling. I'm giving this talk on a balcony, so I can't do anything about the whistling, but anyways. And, guys, I'll read 2 more poems. I'll let the audience choose. Let me see how many poems there are in the collection. There's 33 poems, so people can choose from 1 to 33, except 1 and 7, which I've read. Yo, this guy's whistling too much. Guys, imagine I go into a whistling war with my neighbor, And at some point I'm like, I gotta bring out the guns, and I go find an actual whistle and just start battling it out. Okay, there's 7 viewers, 2 likes. Let's choose number 27. I'll read 27 and I'll go back to the talk. The 27th poem is called Boundless Beginnings. Does the ignition of life need a certain key? Leanne says 33 and Justin says I see 3 likes. Maybe there's 33. I'll read that. I'll read 3 and 33 and I'll end it off. How's that? And people are like, it's your podcast, do whatever you like. All right. Guys, there's a nostalgia to the mind's freedom as a temporary body. So, the 3rd poem. You see, guys, my poetry is inspiring, even motorcycles to go at fast speed. Oh my god, this guy, how does this guy have so much... I don't know if the viewers can hear the whistling, I think this guy has a flying dog and he's whistling for his flying dog to come back to his balcony, Imagine dogs have anti-gravity technology connected to them so no animal can fall anymore. Okay, so the 3rd poem is called Hereditary Madness. What makes families fight over friendship built over falsity? Some people act nice, but if you look at them twice, they have 2 faces. Many creatures of myth have come and go, but who is beyond the blindness of non-experiential belief? What has freed the soul from the idea that it is an idea? The direct experience comes from within, from both within you and within all that is. Do not get mad as long as there is mindfulness. Could a dead poet write about life? When you see God, make sure you open your eyes. The Iron Throne is not a game for the mining companies. You must go within to feel everything through nothing. The greatest freedom is an awareness to an untouchable moment. 'Cause in all your journeys has the moment moved. In the transparency of belief and disbelief, realize how you and the universe are together at once, the truth of all truth. And the poem ends, guys. The victory of our world is the victory of all individual points of intelligence in it. That means if we build an advanced civilization, we all win. But if somebody just lives an advanced life, it's as if only one person won for a little while, you know. Advancement is just the common sense approach to the realm. You know, it's the most, it's the first commandment. That means before it was even survival of the fittest, let's say the creature found a better way to live, advancement. The first thing was just movement, something starting. The starting point of human psychology is the birth of humanity. And finally, guys, the last poem for this poetry tunnel, and so it's the 33rd poem, and it's called When Silence Spoke on Stage. And keep this in mind, guys. I wrote this in 2015, so that's like 6 years ago. What has united all the nations in the dawn of man's future? Can a mystic become the god of words? How does the sensory perception take hold of nothing through everything? You must observe yourself beyond yourself. For the only way is to know you are the way. Do not be mistaken. The divine. Oh, sorry. I don't know what I've written here. Hold on. I've written do not mistaken, but it should probably be do not mistake the divine for a nice thought. We are all the same until we realize the judgment of God is a moment that cannot be judged. Chaos and order shall continue their dance. It is you who must recognize your true eyes. And the poem ends. And so, guys, I'll actually read the 34th poem. It's called Smiling Savants. Can the brain be the seat of the soul? What makes the liver livelier than an empty bottle? Heaven must realize earth is a projection without. As you go within, just like different sectors of the universe, your mind shall work as one. Your individuality is duality, is the spark of unity. Do not doubt the great work of your being that is being the now with the capitalized N. Destiny is more than a lion laughing at the wool on its head. Your heart is precious. It is now time to roar from within. And that's a good point to end the poetry tunnel for this Mr. Within podcast. So anyways, guys, the future is collective. The past was individual. There's a dimension of human psychology where the being is alone, and there's a level of human psychology where the being cannot be alone because energy doesn't have a personality. Energy is just present. That means as I'm speaking to all the listeners right now, right, whatever is going on in my inner realm, simultaneously there's a moment where attention and existence are instantly true. Aziz in the chat section says, can a mystic be a god of words? I would say there is an example in history of Rishi Vyasa. Rishi Vyasa, you can say the author of the Bhagavad Gita and the author of the Mahabharata. This man, some people referred to him back in the day in some sense as the incarnation of God in language. Why? Because he was selfless. So you can say it's as if, imagine you have a human body, but poetically, or let's say theologically, an angelic mind. An angelic mind means you're not going in accordance to your free will, you're going in accordance to the divine will. But the divine will is not an idea, so the divine will is not a relationship the individual has with the world. It's a relationship of how unknown intelligence is moving the moment, and we extract or interpret that as something to do with our psychology, right? It takes a very capable being to be able to sit in a moment and be nothing. That means, when I say be nothing, that means there is no effort. You know, there is such a incredible amount of you can say meditation instructors in the world who've been like, yo buddy, just sit down and don't have thoughts. But that's such the wrong instruction. You know, the idea is that, believe it or not, our biology is an event. Everybody can understand this. Our how we're being a biological creature is an event. Now our mind is being an event overlaid upon this event. So it's like two films where their transparency has become different. Right? The inner realms somehow, the outer realms and the inner realms, they have transparency. That means 50% of our perception is like mind forged, 50% of it is body's reaction to the stimulus of its environment forged. And of course it's human psychology. This is why I realized the most important thing is to be playful, guys. Let me tell you why. Because in reality, you take it seriously, wars happen. We have to playfully, seriously advance civilization, you know. And what that means is we find contentment with our simple dimensions. Because anytime, whoever you are, you just, like, even wherever you are, in anything. Let's say whether you're a podcaster, whether you're an architect, whether you're a chef, whether you are a billiard player, whoever you are, right? You can look at that system, first try to understand how is this system simply existing. That means you're looking for the universals. They call this in philosophy a universal. What that means is, for example, the color blue is a universal. There is no explanation. Nobody can teach you the color blue. You just see it and it is it. Right? So when we want to understand the simple dimensions of a system, anything we're doing, we want to first understand how things are being. And from a stillness of an awareness of one's own presence of how they're being, then they trust the moment. So it's as if people don't trust their minds and their bodies moving, and they're like, why is karma happening? But if you trusted your mind and you moved, there would be no karma. It would be the consequence of your own piloting. You see? The eyes of our eyes are beyond these eyes. And so the unknown must be defended in a time where I will tell you, if the concept of the unknown is analytically trying to be in exile, to be forgotten, that is a dangerous point in civilization. That means right now the educational system, it is in some sense possessed by the economical sector, but it still cares for knowledge. And the only way we care for knowledge is we care for the unknown, to use whatever we know to figure out the new unknown. You know, the new of what that can be known. So the route is really fascinating. That means if the whole species was inside we were all driving a vehicle, and we each had this giant vehicle, and everybody had their own steering wheel. Imagine a giant spaceship where everybody has their own part in the spaceship where they're controlling. When you discover, back to the idea of that universal, in the simple observation of any system, there is a part of the system that's being without anything being added to it. Then there's how the system is responding to its environment. That means, believe it or not, I sometimes treat ideas like wild animals. That means when I thought about gravity, I didn't assume I know what the animal's gonna do. Do you know? I have found a way somehow as a human being in trusting how my being is being unknown, but its expression is known. Our eyes are functioning in two dimensions, and you can say a sort of wave in classical, you could say the classical approaches to understanding the brain. So you could say a sort of infusion of psychology and biology. It's as if in front of your eyes, we can move objects, and we can move sound. We can create sound. Behind our eyes, we can move geometry. We don't even see sound. Like if somebody hears a great song, you may suddenly imagine yourself walking on the clouds. It's such an incredible song. That means in your inner realms you can access scenarios, just like how when we sleep and we dream, like our physical body is existing in the bed, but our mind is creating a body and a world where we're moving in the dream, right? So the mind has that level of a sophistication. That means anytime you close your eyes, you have as much imagination as the most sophisticated dream you've seen or you've had. That means anybody who's had a next level dream, I'm telling you, that's it. It will literally, dreams are gifts from the unconscious, collective unconscious to the individual conscious entity. There's so much of it unexplored. That means really, just like that scene in Game of Thrones where, everybody was saying, Jon Snow, you don't know anything, man. Jon Snow, you know nothing. It's like the human species, you know nothing. You created all of it out of your own voice. So beyond the voice of man comes a new domain and era of exploration. That means every human being on Earth it's as if the whole planet is a tribe, and we are hunter-gatherers, and we are not hunting and gathering objects anymore. We're hunting and gathering the true nature of the subjective realm. That means it's like we've had it as if we're calling ourselves as if we're people with minds, but then if you ask someone what is the mind, we have nothing. We don't know what to say, because the mind transcends the domains of language. And so guys, this was my attempt in this episode to kind of try to suggest how the future is going to move. And the future, again, nobody knows, because it's just probabilities. That means that everything I've shared in this talk, in these talks of mine, these are just the best probabilities I saw. I'm believe it or not, in my inner realms, the understanding I have of the geometrical dimension is that it is all interconnected. So no shape can exist. That means if we consider shapes exist, the edge of the universe has to exist, because space doesn't mean anything. So in a realm, conceptually, if we choose shape geometry, which the intellectual circles and academia, it is pretty much all like the management of symbols with events. So pretty much it's as if a person has to realize these three things, and I would say they can become an advanced communicator. That there is a level of reality that is a film, there is a level of reality that can be a photograph, and there's a level of reality where they say a photograph is worth 1,000 words. So that's what I'm saying to the listeners, right? People think that the teacher writing notes on a chalkboard, that it's like that's the greatest thing the educational system can do. You know, teachers should just be asking colossal global questions where the child's like, oh my god, this is happening on the planet right now, what can I do? Do you know what I mean? We have the future generations demonstrate. That means it's not that we can get rid of egos, but we can have people build their egos on their greatest ego. That means if you attempt to be your greatest ego, you will access way more. This is just a law of nature, guys. Your effort in the moment will suggest your outcome. So if you're an honest person and you just for a second forget the concept of time and endlessly have this effort to go forth, you will be fascinated how far your inner realms will proceed. You know, sometimes when I'm giving these talks, I feel like my imagination is a drone in a geometrical universe, and as the drone goes closer to the geometry, it becomes cinematic experiences. You know? So all of humans, like this is the next thing where psychologists, sociologists, and linguists, you know, have to, not scientists specifically and not philosophers specifically. These three archetypes have to in some sense join and in some sense begin thinking about the edges of the human dimension. You know, that means it's as if it's like, it's not enough saying that a person is experiencing something simultaneously in physical sensory life behind their eyes. Like that is, imagination is such an unknown variable. It's like the unknown consciousness is like the unknown x variable in a mathematical equation, right? And a part of the and this is how I would say it. It's as if this is the equation of reality, okay guys? It's as if x equals 0 plus 1 plus 2 plus infinity plus y. That is the equation. The y is, why are we conscious in the world at all, you know? And we try to see ourselves as a mechanism, but we somehow snapped out of the slumber and enchantment of unconscious nature, right? It's as if the lion roars when it gets serious, and the human, it's like the chimp kind of evolved when it got serious. It was as if the roar of the body was the birth of the subjective evolution. Anyways, guys, I'm going to share one story and then end this off. And so I'll be on Discord for a little bit after if people want to engage these topics that I share. So, and guys, because it's one lifetime, I would say everybody who's been listening to the talks for a while should probably enter Discord. You know, that's it makes sense. So a story I'm going to tell you. There's a story from this Sufi mystic poet from 700 years ago, from the land which is now called Iran. This Sufi mystic poet, his name was Hafez, and Hafez, there was another next level, way more enlightened than him, poet by the name of Attar of Nishapur, and Hafez of Shiraz. Hafez al-Shirazi wants to become a disciple. Hafez, in one of his poems in the book called The Gift, he shares this, where he goes to Attar and he says, Attar, I want to be your disciple. Like Attar is like such a aware and conscious being that Hafez says, I want to be your disciple, but Hafez has a desire. And Attar sees this and says, you're not ready, you can't be my disciple. And Hafez gets so offended by this, as if his ego wanted something and didn't get it. How dare the universe not give the ego what it wants? And so Hafez goes to the desert, he draws a circle in the sand and sits there, and for 40 days he sits meditating in the circle, literally like how Buddha sat. He sits there meditating. I don't know if he had a rosary and he was chanting or not, like sacred names of God or whatnot, but he goes and sits in this circle in the middle of the desert for 40 days, right? And guys, this was 700 years ago. Keep that in mind. This is a story from 700 years ago. And so he's sitting there, and this is how the story goes, where so Hafez is offended. He sat there for 40 days. At the end of the 40 days, an angel comes to Hafez. An angel in the inner realms of Hafez appears. That means a messenger, a ray of the divine, appears to Hafez, right? And so Hafez is sitting there in the circle in the desert, and the angel says, Hafez, you have reached a point where you have no more desires. So heaven has come and said you can have anything you want from paradise, any technology, any secret knowledge, anything you want, any truth. And Hafez is standing there, and this angel that has appeared in his inner realms is offering him a heavenly truth, as if the fulfillment of heavenly desire. That means, who said gods can't have desires? So Hafez says nothing, and he stands in the silence as if he has found something that no longer needs to touch an object or a subject to be true. Something that is prior to any truth a creature could say, any language that could enter your mind, any voice that could find your inner ear, your heart's ear, or the ear of the heart of hearts, which is the same for everyone. Hafez, the angel, disappears, vanishes, and Hafez stands up from the circle and just walks to Attar. And Attar sees him and says, now you're ready. What that means is now you have surpassed your desire for a certain objective outcome, your desire for a certain outcome, and pretty much like the Zen mind, you're just present in the moment, and attention can pilot without past interference or future barriers. It's as if all those people who have negative karma, all they need to do is just put their psychology on pause like a video game, go outside and find somewhere where there's grass, like a grassland or a field or somewhere where there's nature and trees, and just put their hand, on the ground, or if you really don't want to get your hand dirty, put your hand on a tree, but I would say put your hand on the ground. So so as you put your palm on the ground, that's kind of like bowing to the earth, I would say. And put your hand on the earth and just say to the universe, forgive the ignorance and allow the clarity. So put your palm on the earth and just acknowledge that there is an earth here. And because we're an extension of the earth and we're alive, the earth is alive. and just honor the simpler dimensions that the realm requires to advance through to truly reach that civilization 2.0 advanced communicator level. That means any person who has thought a negative idea, literally that has been you using energy to project something in your inner realms, or hold on to something in your inner realms, and literally you can do the opposite, or it could be any idea. You can even move beyond good and bad and look at reality and just filter it through efficient, inefficient. Efficient cares for the human biology and cares for the proper utility of technology in the future. Cares for the mind that wields technology. And the other side is bestowed with a similar grace. I hope in this episode people realize there's no such thing as a philosopher. We are a philosophical animal by the nature of cosmic design, and how evolution has turned an object into a subject to itself. That means it's right now, there's so many scholars needed in the educational system to come and fill out all these gaps, where it's as if there is no really, that means, you know what it is? It's just a species trying to gather all its ideologies to find some retaliation to a surviving extinction. That means, imagine children go to class, and the parents are like, so kids, what did you learn today at school? And the kids are, imagine this is an advanced civilization, and the kids will be, the teacher asked us, or the parent would be like, what's your homework? Let's say a parent who wants to see if their child even knows what the homework is. That means, imagine you ask your child, what is the homework? And your child has to explain to you exactly what the homework is, for example. That way you'll know if the child has understood the homework and knows what to do, or is going to be distracted, because when someone doesn't know what to do, they don't want to try it usually. The children would say our homework is trying to find how we can quickly build an advanced civilization. Our homework is to quickly access a global archetype with a universally successful intent. And for the first time, we say we, as a species, value liberty. I can tell you that has been the one common denominator in all nations, even though nations have fought, even though we have had a brutal history, our history has been savage, but I will tell you, ever since we started walking in a civilized way, a new history has bloomed, a history of another probability of being more a mind rather than a body. So we want an advanced civilization. I thought about it, and I'm like, if there was the most advanced being on the planet, the most advanced human being, what would that most advanced human being deserve? And it gave me goosebumps when I thought about that. Because what the most advanced human being deserves is the most advanced expression and the most advanced reception. And one of the most best analogies I have found, pretty much my approach is, I wake up in the day and I'm an attention roaming the space-time continuum. And based on where my attention is, the identity arises. But really, I have understood that energy doesn't have personality, yet we're being it consciously. And I don't know, I think subconsciously people know this, but it has to be vocally said. Honor the unknown, and you will be surprised what will happen in your life. Your eyes will see dimensions and update automatically. We'll see new dimensions, And the educational system in the future, let me tell you what it's going to do. Right now, the educational systems is like, we got to tell these kids something, and so they're just giving answers that pass the past-stat. But in some sense, the educational system should just be teaching kids questions, and then there is enough information for people to go find the answer themselves, right? So that means the educational system's purpose in the future would just be in trying to make children not students of teachers that are locked in certain ideological systems, but to make children explorers of how far the human species' eyes can fathom, both in the inner realms and the outer realms. If your eyes have seen a better way to walk, your feet are waiting for your own sunrise. There is a quote by Rabindranath Tagore. He says, "Faith is the bird that feels the dawn while it's dark." And so humanity right now, we right now may be like, what a egotistical, cruel human, like look at how many egotistically cruel human archetypes we have in the system of the global society. But I would say that is just the darkest hour of our ignorance in the dualistic simulation. Literally, the humanity as a species, imagine it's an airplane in a cloud and it's inside a storm. That storm is the linguistic simulation's lack of multidimensionality. As we pilot towards an era where multidimensionality means all the isms got evaporated like snow in a new sunlight, you know. Dear listeners, at some point the psychology has to be like, what is the most advanced solution? And it starts from simple momentary living. That means you master the minimalistic dimensions of your life. And let's say you go towards the, I don't know what the term would be, maximalistic dimensions of your life. That means become comfortable with the simple understanding of how become comfortable with how the world is simply being, and then build the story of knowledge around the simple dimensions that are true. And then every person would, in some sense, I wouldn't say you are activating your DNA, but your expression is going to be piloted smoothly. Because communication is an art and it's a technology. That means if I in the future have workshops where I'm trying to share something with people and from an artistic angle, you know, from a designer's perspective, it's as if pretty much the design of the soul has to do with how your attention is being. And when you're content with energy being and you see your whole life you have been, the suffering of what happens to energy goes away. Then the only suffering remains is the I thought being like, okay, so I realized because everything is the periodic table, there is no death literally. There was just separation for a certain time from the atomic reality, right? So the body is in some sense only to the human being separate from the world. To everything else, it's just being phenomenology, you know. And so in a world where human beings are all wondering about what their most advanced self would look like, that is how an advanced civilization arises. That means Mr.Within is saying, don't think about what you deserved in the past. Don't think about what you deserve now. Think about what kind of world, that means the whole world, what kind of world that your greatest, if I was to say your great grandkids to the power of infinity deserve, as far as you can see, and you attempted to live that level of advance, you would be literally doing an incredible contribution to the realm. And those people who do this, they become pilots, and you see that. Like this YouTube is filled with so many people, and even you see in, for example, the film industry, so many let's say celebrities or actors and actresses, they in some sense have realized that there's a dimension of existing to people as an image, and then there's a dimension of being a human being among humanity. Right? And cyberspace has allowed us, and something strange that has happened. It was actually, I was so shocked the other day. I'm like, the coronavirus happened, like the second black plague of our history, let's say. And the coronavirus forced people to use technology to connect. That means right now there's this app called Clubhouse, okay? And on this app, and the people from all around the world are finding like these rooms, these servers, and they're talking in it. And to me, I was like, Corona has made us live as minds. Our bodies can be anywhere, but our mind is finding itself among other minds. Right now, what's happening with this live stream? One person's communicating from Toronto, Canada, and others from wherever they are hearing it. And whoever you are listening it's a good idea, I'd appreciate it if you can write down from where you're listening, actually. That would be cool to know. But anyways, how we pilot our attention from our personal dimensions, that means master your inner realms. And the moment you can trust your inner realms, it's very easy to express yourself in the outer realms. And it's all about how attention is moving. Pretty much we pilot from our bedroom into a world with so many dimensions, a societal level, a natural level, a technological level, an information level, a geometrical level, an emotional level. There's so many ways that the creature is taking place in the world, That means the fact sometimes we're peaceful and there hasn't been like nuclear self-extinction of the species. It's kind of like, whoa, as if there is some other dimension shielding us from our own ignorance, as if the future is way more better if we're all around rather than not, But anyways, thanks for listening, guys, and this episode is dedicated to the day where the first Sky City will lift off into there, And that's when I would know that my Mr.Within talks have been heard. When the first Sky City is, in some sense, rises, That would be so cool. You'd be like walking your dog in the park with like this force field leash, and, you'd be walking your dog, or maybe your dog would have some AI connected to it where it could communicate. The dogs could talk, imagine, in the future with their owner through advanced technology connected to them, but not connected to their brain, kind of like around them, like their collar is going to allow them to speak, imagine. Right? So imagine a person's walking with their dog, no longer walking their dog in the future, and suddenly they're like, wait a minute, are the skyscrapers getting taller? And you see the first Sky City lift off into there, and a giant shadow, which is the brightest moment of humanity will take place, the first great technological eclipse, and the first birth of the legend. That means the full, completed, archaic revival of the legend of the castle in the sky, of the kingdoms in the clouds. We would have achieved that, and I'd be like, finally, this algorithm that I've been expressing through this whole project has smiled from the future anyways. There is so much, that means the moment the person, if you treat every person as multidimensional, that means your impression of them is like 1 degree of perception, and they have like another, like they have 360 degrees to their psychology, right? And I've understood this, I've had, I could tell you, everybody's been studying human psychology from the beginning of their life, but I've sometimes wondered about what I've seen. And I will tell you, we are an expression-based creature. Every human being, in order to have a healthy mind and body, requires to meet a certain expression threshold and reception threshold in accordance to the archetype or the Iron Man suit of thought they wear that day, or they express themselves as. Because, guys, if you have emotions on language, then language might possess you. But if you treat language as geometry, all concepts as ultimately just symbols that within them are films, images. It's as if in the search for truth, we realize in order for us to access truth, it has to be as instantaneous as where our consciousness is happening. That means it's hilarious. It's as if truth is like standing exactly where we are, and the person's like, where do I look for truth? Do I go climb this mountain and act like a totally different cultural framework to find truth? It's like, no. You just realize life is the greatest show, and we can choose to care for this 4.5 billion year science project you know, that our ancestors have left behind, called I term it as civilization 1.0, or we can choose to leave it behind. Imagine we were all like, yeah guys, we were such loving and kind people, but our civilization was getting destroyed by ignorance, you know, and we're like, it's fine because we still love each other. It's like, great, you know, how far can love take us when actually you're in a battlefield of the information age. You know, I've dedicated episodes to this. We probably, maybe tomorrow I'll dedicate an episode on the language wars, right? And if people are like, Mr. Within, have you written a book on this? I'll be like, these talks, if I transcribe them, they'll technically be a book, so I guess so, you know. That's the thing about language. Ultimately, it's like we're all translating films into a language, or language into film. That's pretty much all that the educational system is giving. But this should be synchronized, and there should be a sort of experiential dimension to the educational system. What that means is, as a final thought, guys, I know that I'm stretching this episode, but the greatest strategy, or let's just say it simply, what Mr. Within finds to be the greatest chess move of the human species. And when I say a chess move, the question should come, a chess move against what? And so we are a known civilization. All our methods and knowledge and information is stuff that is in our conscious knowing, right? But what we're playing chess with is the unknown. So that means we're in the known world, and that side of the coin, and then there's the unknown world, and we're playing chess with the unknown, right? And one strategy is, in some sense, we make the first move, and that's what we did in regards to creating knowledge. The other strategy is kind of like how Lao Tzu says, action through inaction in the Tao Te Ching, where we don't do anything, and nature makes a chess move, and then we make our chess move. Do you know? This is why the mystic's antenna was way more polished and aligned than, I would say, than the emotional seeker. Because I will tell you, emotions are very powerful. Emotions are like energy just concentrated, you know, as a response to the effect of something. And so the ripples on the pond of the mind shall settle, and truth will no longer look for itself in space and time when it has created them. So in the chat section, Justin says, in context, the language wars like semantics, but there is no question, Justin, so I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, you're asking me if what I mean by the language wars somehow. Okay, no, I understand your question. So you're saying in context of the language wars, what I'm saying is, so if I mean it's a war, no. I mean, sure, it has to do with semantics. So pretty much what is going on in language is that language is moving in front of our eyes in a certain way, and it's moving behind our eyes in a certain way. In front of our eyes, it's a singular dimension where we're individual objects with individual personalities. This is a template of the modern status quo, right? This template may change in the future. In the future, right now, every human people don't have the same comfort they have in their living room, for example, when they walk in the street, right? But in the future, civilization may become so advanced that they might have that level of comfort, and we'd see a level of people's psychology that is peaceful. That means the peacefulness allowed for all the creative dimensions to begin directing civic culture towards an efficient multidimensionality rather than an inefficient absolutist singular view. Do you know that means it's like, aren't people tired of putting life into the box of language? I mean, after some point, you gotta honor the Iron Man suit. You only use the Iron Man suit when you need it. If Tony Stark uses the Iron Man suit and goes shopping, you know, and buys groceries and comes back, people will be like, that's not cool, bro. You know, it's like, go fight. Use the Iron Man suit to fight bad guys. Don't use it to show off, like, you know. It's like, look at how I'm getting my groceries, you know. So you see, that means the technology has to be used. When I speak, because I'm very old school in my mind, that means I kind of see myself as like, when I say old school in my mind, that means in how I express my personality in the outer realms. I use language like a sword that is sheathed. And only when an idea is so important to be shared, I usually speak, because the whole point of the moment is experiential evolution, not just idea transference. Because the ideas have to appear as a film, or the person hasn't understood them. Anytime you understand something, you know how, I think it was Einstein, he's like, if you understand something, you can say it simply, right? So true understanding would be as if you could explain a film preview in an instant. And that's the method I've taken to knowledge. For me, every book I read, it's just a film I saw in my inner realms. Or all these quotes that I'm sharing with the listeners, they have a cinematic value. You know, before the, like, as if the language got linked to the cinematic direct experience of the concept. If everybody realizes they're an explorer of humanity's vision, and everybody has a unique DNA, and you can use your intelligence to live as a mind and serve the mind of civilization, rather than we just repeat the animal algorithm, which is repeated for so long, you know? Anyways, guys, I hope this talk has been helpful, and I would encourage, you know how people water their plants, you know, I would encourage the listeners to water the membership of this YouTube channel. You know, because a sequoia, you know, this is the incredible thing about nature, guys. You plant a sequoia seed, and it's just the seed. You're like, no way, look at how small the seed is. And over time, it becomes a giant tree, right? And the human mind starts as a singular idea of self, kind of robotically. And then as the person experiences life, it activates. Whereas the inner realms begin to speed up, somehow it activates. You know, imagine Tony Stark has kids in the future, and one of his children's like, Dad, I want to use the Iron Man suit. And Tony Stark is like, son, the Iron Man suit will possess you. No human being should enter. It makes you into a superhero who's fighting bad guys till the end of time. You know, no person can wield the responsibility that comes with an Iron Man suit, you know. And eventually Tony Stark sees his children, of course, you know, it's like they're eventually going to build their own Iron Man. Imagine Tony Stark tells his children, you can't wear an Iron Man suit, you can only wear one if you build one. Imagine that, how, and his children would end up being engineering geniuses. Anyways, guys, through the honor of the outer realms, the honor of the inner realms, the synchronization of the moment, the awareness of the presence beyond personality, the human being is being before the human archetype is arising. That's where free will is attributelessly being a sort of wind that moves the outer realms. So your mind is like a wind, and your body is like what the wind is moving, you know. And so as we honor nature, truth has been restored or remembered, you know. So thanks for listening, guys. You know, nature is our eyes realizing the unknown is unknown. That is the biggest truth of nature. And it's a very incredible thing, guys. Like when Socrates says the only true wisdom is to know that you know nothing, The unknown is where your mind now has a permission to see what other probabilities, and in what other ways all the branches of the knowledge human beings have so far can be extended. Only through the human mind's care to want to know more than what it is seeing, it evolves. All the species that didn't want to see anything more, they couldn't, And of course, guys, I think stand-up comedians have an incredible role in society. Let me tell you why they have an incredible role. Because humor is the negotiation stage, or a stage of union for the chaotic and ordered archetypes. That means you could have a good guy and a bad guy fighting, and somebody saying a joke, and then both the good guy and bad guy laughing, and after they're done laughing, suddenly continue fighting again. But for that moment where the joke transported the audience's attention to a different universe where the probabilities were different, do you know what that means? To me, stand-up comedians are right now, people. There's a quote from Manly P. Hall I should read about stand-up comedy. Manly P. Hall evidently is a man of esoteric context. For me, esotericism is ignorance of the simpler truth. That means beyond the theater games of man's mind, truth is wondering when are we going to realize we're inside its attention. Truth is not in our attention. That's what I keep saying, being present before your personality, because your presence is not just your body being still in the moment. Your presence is how your mind notices everything, and even behind you, even though we don't have eyes behind our back, the brain in the inner realms is simulating what there could be behind the person's back. That means even though I don't have a 360 view, but in my imagination makes my perception every moment, and when I walk outside, 360 view. So the inner realms can fill that gap. Guys, I don't know if this quote is, I'm going to find this quote at all. But I'll just read this one quote from Manly P. Hall. He says, "To live in the world without becoming aware of the meaning of the world is like wandering about in a great library without touching the books." So, anyways, I'll tell you the idea. I don't know where the quote is, but Manly P. Hall was saying, like, comedians, if they follow through the archetype of ignorant suffering, they will focus on the lesser moral of man. But there's a level, it's as if right now there's a paradigm in stand-up comedy that hasn't happened, where the stand-up comedian is talking about a world that's not just this soft utopia, but it's talking about how the unknown is endlessly changing the world. That means we're talking about the world as if it's a noun, but if it's a verb, that changes the context of speech. So the era of communication will get to a point where we'll realize language is a way where we copy-paste the world behind our eyes, and we move it faster than the world is happening now, and then we compare, and then we make a decision, and that's how our personality emerges in the moment. And I'll tell you guys, there is no significance. The world doesn't need leaders and followers. The world just needs human beings that realize they're on a rock in the middle of nowhere. And as Marshall McLuhan and Buckminster Fuller said, in some sense, spaceship Earth. That means enough with the costume games. We're all pilots. We're all crew members of humanity, which is being piloted by every individual's decision, and even our collective response to future arrival. One thing I forgot to mention, oh my god, I'm so glad I remembered before I ended the talk. So I forgot to talk about extraterrestrial probabilities of interference in the future. I talked about 3,600 years, but I didn't talk about what if extraterrestrials arrive and they give us a boost? Or what if extraterrestrials arrive and our understanding of reality changes? What if extraterrestrials arrive and we realize it's as if we have arrived, So what I mean by this is that the human psychology is like this character in a story where every sensory experience of the body updates it. So if an extraterrestrial like lands on Earth tomorrow and the whole species has to go greet it or something, you know, let's say it's an enlightened extraterrestrial, I would just treat it as a curved possibility of the visible other. But if the extraterrestrial doesn't have an understanding of space, that means if the extraterrestrial may test us, guys. There may be a collective being, like a field of intelligence that's extraterrestrial, and it sends forth, it animates an embodiment, and it's just waiting to see if our species notices that the extraterrestrial is a field of intelligence, as if our atmosphere poetically, is alive, And the concept of the collective unconscious, which Carl Jung shared, that is the greatest inspiration. Like, whenever I just heard that concept, guys, those two words together in Carl Jung's work, I was like, Carl Jung was like, if philosophy was a base, let's say if philosophy and the quest, if the mystery of reality was a baseball game, Carl Jung hit a home run. He said, like, literally the concept of the collective unconscious is like what Socrates was trying to say when he said the only true wisdom is for you to know you know nothing, because the collective unconscious is present, but we don't know beyond our conscious framework of intelligence how it's present. In the future, right now I'm starting this kind of advanced communication movement, or attempting to, and I don't know how far my voice is going to echo, and I don't know how far like the future is going to go, but the whole idea is I want all systems, I want all eyes of humanity to begin having a sort of outer realm study and an inner realm study. And I don't have the resources for this, but if you're a billionaire listening to me, go create a system where there is a reward for the greatest questions anybody attempts to answer. A financial reward system. Where it's as if we are trying to get a global community to reformat the whole system, so that this system can then be the better. It's as if we're trying to create a better tourist experience for temporary biological creatures. We start with the human dimensions. That means there should be in all political discussions a question asked by the moderator where, tell us about your morality, tell us about your idea of human decency. A sort of philosophical questioning where the citizens who are voting for their political leaders get a sense of, all right, how is this person looking at the world? What is the axiology of the psychology of that individual who's going to lead the nation? And I'll tell you something incredible. Right now, all the leaders of nations, they have unknown dimensions too. That means every person alive right now is a unique DNA functioning, right? And it's all about how we can find the collective victory before the individual loss, So if extraterrestrials arrive, we're going to try to communicate with them, and there has to be an inner study. What that means is, if this is a what if scenario, I thought about if in the future our species, imagine like, that guy in the movie Thor, who was the guardian of Asgard, that guy who could look anywhere in the universe holding that sword. So imagine you're a guardian of humanity, the archetype, just this pattern of intelligence that is humanity, and you're like, in the future, what if an extraterrestrial lands on Earth and they don't have, like, let's say they telepathically, there's a mind in extraterrestrial invasion of our species. We don't have any defense system for that, right? The only defense system is like, wake up, like the advancing communication and getting people to begin expressing their minds honestly, so there's honest information in the realm, and then from the honest information and relaying of what is in our inner realms, constantly changing the question. That means it's as if the designers and the advanced communicators in the future, they're going to go to religious people and they're going to be like, listen, we're not fighting, we're not having a battle for who has the right answer. Anybody can have any answer, but the advanced communicators are concerned at what questions are we asking before we're accepting an answer. A question means how far you saw God's creation before you, in some sense, accepted its limit. Do you know? In all religious texts in the Abrahamic tradition, for example, guys, it says God has given man, at least I know of this in the Islamic sense, where it says man has been given aql. So aql means in like a discerning intelligence, something that can see something and decide. Right? This is as if like God's greatest creation, that is man's vision right now. You know, that means it's as if a religious person's like, yo, I'm not just representing the religious people, I'm representing God, but God is not a concept. God is, in some sense, has no partner. What that means is it's as if the truth is so inconceivable, how can it be compared to anything? So in some sense, man's judgment has only been man's judgment. There has never been a human being that has brought divine judgment, because it's impossible when a man is moving there. You know what I mean? So I'm telling you, I am looking at Earth, and based on the speed, I'm a human being who feels civilization would be cooler if things advanced faster. That's it, right? My whole ideological system is that I talked about the past. I saw how the past, all the ways we've been thinking about the past. I even came up with ways of my own of how I thought the past has happened so far. But now it has come to the future. And the future is where art is waiting for the creative vision. To be free means to understand. This is why anybody who's afraid is not free. This is why anybody who thinks they don't deserve it, it's as if, of course, you can't be free. Because you think you don't deserve. Your attention, wherever your attention is on, is like the identification point, is where the reference points is arising, you know. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I'll be on Discord for those interested, and I really felt like this was an incredible episode. I felt great. Like, I can tell you guys, in midway in this episode, I realized like a deeper truth about the Mecha age, you know, that really it would be an age of no ego. The ego can be anything and can be nothing. And so the advanced communicators are the dawn of mankind. You know, they are the greatest archetype. And above the advanced communicator is the pilot. So the pilot of consciousness, when I look at this world, I don't know, maybe it's because of my laziness or energy reservation. But when I talk to all people, to me, in my mind, I'm just filtering it. Is the person a pilot, or is there a person an advanced communicator? A pilot is someone who their attention is outside of the sphere of the known universe. A person who's suffering in life, they're still inside the sphere of the known universe. So at best, they can be an advanced communicator. That means they still have in their karma something to do with duality. But the pilot is the individual who has noticed non-duality. So when you notice non-duality, it means a sort of trust of how you're being before the human psychology is even anything, right? We are a very advanced intelligence. No story can, in some sense, own reality. And let me tell you why. Because even the truth of revelation is in the inconceivable. The truth is the inconceivable. The conceivable seems to be the echo of sin from the theological standpoint. So the question comes that the future generations should not try to be like the past. They should not try to be just like oblivious in the future and do everything they want. Even though freedom, you can do anything you want, but I'm saying it's not like you should, that's the best thing, because the best thing is to have, like, literally, just like the bees are building a beehive, just like the ant builds an anthill, the human being builds advanced civilizations, and this has to happen now. And let me tell you why. Because all the other parallel dimensions, all the parallel Earths are waiting for ours to advance their civilization, and then the cube is complete, brother. You know, mysticism transcends human personality. So there's a question, you refer to God, so Justin says, you refer, in the chat section, you refer to God, or G.OD as in wisdom, strength, and beauty, Greek etymology. God is not a concept, in a way where the experience of it, because we were to think of it this way, think of it that 50% you're an experiential animal and 50% you're an ideological just inner viewer. Okay, so this inner viewer is not the language, but we use the concept of God. That means it's as if I'm saying that at least let's say in the Vedas, they say God is the truth, the ultimate truth is the seer of the seen is unseen. So it's as if energy is watching the world through experiential transformation, and that energy cannot be created or destroyed, and all concepts fathomable to the human mind have a beginning and an end. So do you see? In duality, God is the personality of the cosmos, but in non-duality, God is just the presence of experience. It's pretty much how the whole universe is intelligent. So the collective unconscious is Carl Jung's way of saying, yo guys, that's God. What else could I tell you? It's unknown in the intelligent movement of the whole universe at once. Greatness beyond time has never gone anywhere. You know, the advanced civilization for the non-dual members of civilization is already there. You know, for those in time, we have work to do. This is why I'm saying, you know, this plane of existence is a sort of workstation. But in yoga, I'll say this before I end, in yoga there's 4 types of yoga in Vedanta. They say there is Bhakti yoga, the yoga of love. There is Raja yoga, the yoga of knowledge. There is Karma yoga, the yoga of work. And then there is Jnana yoga, the yoga of meditation. Jnana is like a sort of specific spiritual practice, you know, but the other ways are kind of like karmic paths. So the karma yoga, the karma yogi, and the word yoga means union of the individual activity with the cosmic activity. So the karma yogi is that human being that is through their work getting enlightened. Okay, this is why I brought the concept of the great work even, but before even I had said it, so many other cultures had talked about. The Raja yogi is in the path of knowledge, is the yogi that wants to conceptually understand reality. That means that conceptual understanding can be in an instant, or it can be endured as much as time is a concept, right? So in some sense, the Raja yogi is trying to get enlightened through the inner realms first. You know, the Karma yogi is trying to get enlightened through the work of the outer realms. Now the Bhakti yogi, the yogi that goes on the path of love,
Sadhguru, this man, gave a really incredible metaphor. He said for the Bhakti yogi, it's as if God, the ultimate truth, comes and holds the hand of his child and just guides the child to where it needs to be. So the Bhakti yogi is the path towards truth, where the person loves their whole moment of being. And the moment they love their whole moment of being, there is no one loving the moment of being. It is love, and the cause, that's a causal expression. So the God of the subconscious archetype can only be a loving one. Do you see? So that means Bhakti yogis are getting like VIP access to truth. You know, the lovers of the world will see dimensions that, you know, the intellectuals and those who just focus on work will never see. This is why emotions have a certain glow to them. You know, a human being that can be free in their emotions, like that's what we see, right? The younger the person is, the less boundaries they have for their authentic emotional expression, right? It's as if something in life makes the person not accept themselves, so then they let society define them. But in actuality, you must implement, you must use the free will